There was a time in Canada when one single $100 bill didn't feel just like money. It felt like possibility. A folded piece of paper that could shape a whole week of life, sometimes even more. Today, $100 might disappear in a grocery trip or a single dinner out. But if we travel back to the 1960s in Canada, that same amount carried a completely different weight. And once you see what it could do, you might start to wonder how life ever changed this much or how quickly it all happened. To understand the value of $100 back then, we need to step into Canada as it was in the 1960s. It was a country in motion. Cities were growing, families were settling into suburban homes, and new highways were stretching across provinces like veins of progress. Television had started to become a household companion. Milk was still delivered to doors in glass bottles. And most people didn't think in terms of digital payments or credit apps. They thought in cash, coins, and careful budgeting. The average Canadian worker in the early 1960s earned around $3,000 to $4,000 a year. That means $100 was not casual money. It could represent several days of hard work, sometimes even a full week's wages depending on the job. So when someone held $100 in their hand, it wasn't just spending money. It was a small event in itself. Let's begin where everyday life always begins, the kitchen table. Grocery shopping in the 1960s felt different from today. There were no giant warehouse stores, no endless aisles of imported products from every corner of the world. Instead, there were local grocery shops, butcher counters, and bakeries, where the person serving you often knew your name. With $100, a family could fill their pantry in a way that would feel surprising today. A pound of ground beef might cost around 40 to 50 cents. A loaf of bread could be about 20 cents. A dozen eggs might sit under 60 cents. Even staples like sugar, flour, and potatoes were inexpensive enough that a full grocery cart could be filled without anxiety. A family spending carefully could feed themselves for a week or even longer on just a portion of that $100, depending on size and habits. But it wasn't just about quantity. It was about rhythm. Meals were planned more simply. Nothing felt rushed or overly processed. Cooking at home wasn't a trend. It was simply life. And when people walked out of the grocery store with bags in hand, they didn't feel overwhelmed. They felt prepared. Now, imagine stepping outside that grocery store and walking down a quiet street lined with low-rise buildings, small shops, and parked cars with long chrome details reflecting the sunlight. Because housing in the 1960s tells another surprising story. Rent in Canada was dramatically lower than today. In many cities, a modest apartment could be rented for around $80 to $120 per month. In smaller towns, it could be even less. This means that $100 might cover nearly a full month's rent in some places, or at least a significant portion of it. It's difficult to imagine that today, when rent alone can take a large share of monthly income. But back then, housing felt more reachable. Many families could manage rent with one income, leaving space for savings or small comforts. Homes were simpler too. Not oversized or overloaded with gadgets, but warm, functional spaces where families gathered in the evenings, often around the radio or early television set. And outside, children played freely in neighborhoods where traffic was light and the world felt just a little slower. But life wasn't only about staying at home. Mobility was changing Canada in the 1960s. Cars were becoming more common symbols of freedom and modern life. And yet, they were still a major purchase. A brand new car could cost around $2,000 to $3,000. That means $100 would not buy you a car, of course, but it could contribute meaningfully to ownership. It might cover insurance for months or a significant part of a payment plan. Gasoline, however, was remarkably cheap compared to today. A gallon often cost around 30 to 40 cents, so $100 could keep a family driving for quite a while. Road trips were becoming part of Canadian culture. Families would pack their cars and explore highways that felt new, open, and full of possibility. There was a certain simplicity in travel then. No GPS, no constant notifications, just paper maps, roadside diners, and the sound of tires on long stretches of road. And in that world, $100 was fuel for movement, not just financially, but emotionally too. Then there was entertainment, which in the 1960s had a very different flavor. Going to the movies was a popular weekend activity. A cinema ticket often cost around $1 or less. That means $100 could take an entire family to the movies dozens of times. A night at the theater wasn't just about watching a film. It was an event. People dressed up a little, bought popcorn that costs just a few cents, and sat together in a shared experience of storytelling. Television was also growing rapidly. A brand new TV set might cost a few $100s, but once purchased, it became the center of the living room. Families would gather around it in the evenings, watching news, variety shows, and early entertainment programs. Even small luxuries like a night out at a diner were affordable. A full meal might cost a couple of dollars, so $100 could stretch into many evenings of simple enjoyment. Entertainment wasn't constant or overwhelming like today. It was occasional, anticipated, and appreciated in a quieter way. And then there was work itself. Wages in the 1960s reflect a different economy. Many workers earned hourly rates that seem extremely low by today's standards, often around $1.50 to $2.50 per hour, depending on the job and region. So when someone held $100, they could see it as a result of many hours of labor, sometimes nearly a full week of work for many families. That perspective shaped how money was treated. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't wasted easily. Every dollar had a story behind it. People saved more carefully, planned more intentionally, and often relied less on borrowing. But perhaps the most interesting part of $100 in the 1960s is not just what it could buy, but how it felt. There was a sense of balance in everyday life. Things were not overly expensive, but incomes were also modest. People didn't feel rich in a modern sense, but they often felt stable. A $100 bill could fix a problem, create a small comfort, or provide breathing room in a household budget. It wasn't just spending power, it was reassurance. Now, if we gently step back into the present for a moment, the contrast becomes hard to ignore. Today, $100 can disappear quickly. Groceries, transport, subscriptions, and daily expenses all move faster than they once did. The value has changed not only because prices rose, but because the structure of life itself has shifted. We live in a world of speed, convenience, and constant access. The 1960s, by comparison, moved at a slower rhythm. Money stretched differently because life itself stretched differently. And maybe that is the most important reflection of all. When we think about $100 in 1960s Canada, we're not just comparing prices, we're comparing lifestyles, expectations, and the way people experienced everyday life. It reminds us that value is not only about numbers, it is about context, about time, about how people lived, worked, and connected with the world around them. So the next time you hold a $100 bill or see it on a screen, pause for a moment. Because not so long ago, in a very different Canada, that same amount could fill a pantry, support a home, fuel a journey, and create memories that lasted far beyond the money itself. And in that quiet realization, the past doesn't feel so distant anymore. It feels like a reflection, just a few generations away. If this journey through time made you see everyday money a little differently, then you've already taken a step back into history with us here at North Rewind.